So come on in, have a seat. Welcome, everybody, to the IETF 103 plenary here on our first visit to Bangkok, Thailand. My name is Alyssa Cooper, and I'm the chair of the IETF. I think some of you may have noticed that this hotel, being our first time at this hotel, but they've already figured us out. I saw this morning when I got off the elevator, and I was like, wait, that way? This way? I know some of us could use software basic training a little bit more than others, but the hotel was just trying to direct us all in the right place. We've done a lot of really important work here this week, and it's been a busy week already. It's a little bit strange to have the plenary now on the second to last day instead of the third to last day. Feels like we've accomplished a lot. I wanted to call out in particular a very important discussion that happened the other day about what should be the name of the next version of HTTP. And for those of you who weren't there in the room, I wasn't actually there in the room myself, but I understand that one of the names that was offered was Dave, that the protocol could be called Dave. But it seems that I think this was a Mike Bishop slide that he actually had a particular outcome in mind, which was that it should be called HTTP3, I'm assuming by the Technicolor 3 that was on his slide. But I understand that it was a contentious debate, and it wasn't really clear until the end what the protocol was actually going to be named. Even in the pull request that that's been submitted to rename the protocol, it's still being debated. Should it be called Zanzibar Buck Buck McFate McCave, or should it be called HTTP3? So lots of important discussion happening there. In addition to that, though, I understand that there's already interoperable implementations of the current version of HTTP3 that was mentioned today in the quick working group. So that is a very exciting development of the week. Here's our agenda for tonight. We're going to hear from our meeting hosts and appreciate our local host. We don't always have a local host, but we had a very, very helpful local host here. Then you'll hear brief updates from myself, from the Internet Architecture Board, from our administrative board and staff, and from the IETF Trust. We'll get a NomCom update and an update from the RFC editor. We'll have a preview of IETF 104 from our co-host, CZ Nick. We'll do some recognition of people in our community, and then we're going to have open microphone sessions. There's no technical topic at this plenary, so it will be another short one, hopefully. I hope it'll be short. So first, I just want to say a huge thank you to our meeting hosts for this meeting, Huawei and Cisco. We cannot put these meetings on without the support of our sponsors, and in particular of our hosts, who provide a tremendous amount of financial support in order for us to be able to have all of the, not just cookies, but amazing food and other things that have been provided at this venue. So huge thanks to our sponsors. We have a small token of appreciation. So if I could first invite Cullen Jennings from Cisco to come on up.
So cool.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, you get to keep that. You do get to keep it. It's your very own plaque. Yes. And next, I'd like to invite Ryan Q from Cisco. Come on, from Huawei. Come on up.
Thank you, Alisa. Cisco, Huawei is friends. No problem. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks, IETF, give us the opportunity for hosting the first ever Bangkok meeting in Thailand, and also thank our all the friends. Yeah. And also thank you for our old friends, Cisco, and also the local hosting, the should be Tinic, to co-hosting with this IO103 meeting. Okay, so I am Ryan, and I'm the standardization VP of Huawei, and we're responsible for all Huawei IETF activities in Huawei company. Then Huawei has been and will continue to our strong commitment to IETF. We are working with all the talents here to make IETF success. And we are happy to have a meeting here in this very beautiful city and country. We all know Thailand is a Buddhist country, and we understand Buddhist country, the mission is making people living better, which is very familiar with our IETF mission, make the internet work better. So we are we hope we are just enjoy all the meetings, discussions, and also the food, the beautiful city here. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
So as mentioned, we also had a local host this time. Whenever we go to a new location, it's always incredibly helpful to have a local host who can assist with all matter of logistics, of visa issues, bringing in other local sponsors. And our local host this time, Nick, was just incredibly helpful on all of those fronts, helping us navigate this new city and this new country for us. So please join me in thanking Nick. So moving on to the report that I have for everybody. I have a few topics to cover this evening. We'll start with some participant statistics, talk a little bit about some of the experiments that we've been running at this meeting, give a short update about the IASA 2.0 effort, and just a brief reminder about our standards of professional behavior. So participant statistics for this meeting, we had 146 attendees on site, 107 first-time attendees. And if you compare back to a year ago when we were in Singapore, we're a little bit down on attendance from that meeting. We have attendees from 56 different countries, which is fairly standard for our meetings. So people might be looking at that overall participation number. It's definitely on the low end. I thought it might be useful to kind of put that into a little bit of context. There's many different theories about why there were fewer people at this meeting than there have been in a very long time. I don't think on the IETF side we have really enough data to be able to explain that. So people can make a lot of guesses, a lot of assumptions, but we're going to be gathering some more data in order to try to figure out what it was about this particular meeting, this particular time of year that caused fewer people to show up than usual. So we'll be sending in our post-meeting survey some specific questions about this, and we'll be targeting that specifically to people who we know have attended in the past but didn't attend this meeting to try and gather some more data to help us understand what happened here at this meeting. But as I said, I thought it might just be interesting to put this in a little bit of context. So this graph shows you the meeting attendance back to IETF 72. And you can see that it fluctuates based on time of year and based on location of meeting, but that this one is indeed quite a bit lower even than the recent past history. You can also see on this graph the first-time attendees total, and that too, in this instance, is a bit down from where it normally is, or even from its normal fluctuation. If you look at attendance by country, I just cherry-picked a few countries and regions so as not to clutter the slide. But if you look at these 5 countries and regions representing the places from which we have the most participants attending the meetings, you can see here too that this very much fluctuates based on meeting location. I didn't actually write the meeting locations on the slide, but you can probably guess the regions for each meeting by looking at the trends in the graph. So typically when we meet in Europe, we have more Europeans. When we meet North America, we have more North Americans. And when we meet in Asia in particular, you can see like the green line. Often when we meet in Japan, we have a huge spike in the number of Japanese attendees. Same thing happened when we met in China. You can see the spike when we met in Korea from South Korean attendees. So that's not a surprising pattern. But you can see at this meeting here that the trend lines for our the Asian countries from which we typically draw the most participants are fairly flat compared to the last several meetings. And the trend lines for both the US and Europe are down, which kind of explains the overall number. People are always asking about the trends in remote participation, so I thought it might be interesting to look at that a little bit as well. So the top graph just shows you the total number of remote participants. This does not include IETF 103 because we actually don't have the full data yet. We still have a day left of the meeting and people kind of register and attend throughout the week. So we didn't want to give incomplete data there. But you can see that this is, fluctuating between about 400 and 700 remote participants, the bulk of whom attend 1 or 2 working groups usually. At the bottom of the slide, you can see some statistics about the nature of remote participation, the number of times that people get into the mic queue, the number of remote presentations given, and the number of remote presenters. So, if you look at those as compared to the total number of people who are attending, it's actually quite a good ratio. So we have active participation from our remote folks. Also wanted to look at trends from the hackathon. So we don't have data going back quite as far on the hackathon that we really trust, but we can look at the data throughout this year. And we see that the trend line on the hackathon is going upwards. And I think in particular, given the fact that attendance in the meeting was down this time, the fact that we still had record attendance at the hackathon is certainly notable. So that continues to go up and up, and we continue to get larger and larger rooms to accommodate all the people who want to come and hack on the weekend before the meeting. In addition to the 250 overall and 32 remote, we had 28 different projects that were being worked on last weekend at the hackathon. We also had the hack demo happy hour where folks got to present their projects and expose them more widely in the community on Monday night. Definitely would appreciate feedback from people to understand if that's an helpful, interesting event. There's other ways that we can change or improve the hackathon. I would be happy to understand that. Also, you can speak to Charles Eckel, who's been coordinating those hackathons for us. And the next IETF hackathon will be in Prague just prior to IETF 104. So onto our experiments. At this meeting, we are running an experiment where we do not have working group sessions meeting on Friday. So we have approximately the same number of sessions that we normally do. We just shortened some of the slots so that we could accommodate the same number of groups in a shorter number of days. We also provided for meeting space to be available all day on Friday for people to have ad hoc meetings, do further, more intensive collaboration. We have 4 side meetings scheduled on Friday. So the idea of this was to introduce more time into the week where people could have that kind of ad hoc collaboration, and also to allow people who were coming in or who are getting accustomed to coming in for the hackathon to not have it extend over multiple weekends necessarily. We've received a lot of feedback, even before this meeting started, about the fact that Friday is not an ideal day for ad hoc collaboration, and maybe we should have partial days where we do this instead of a whole day, that the pressure that this has put on scheduling conflicts, interaction with other co-located meetings. So in this case, we have the IEEE 802 meeting, which is happening next week. So freeing up that Friday didn't necessarily help people who were going to be attending both meetings. So this is an experiment. We definitely want your feedback about this, what you thought of it. If there's other ways that you think we could make the IETF meeting week and the agenda work better for you, we definitely want to hear about that. So please send email to the IESG, and we will be engaging with the community on that. We're also experimenting with different ways of presenting information about unofficial side meetings. So this grew out of some feedback that we received at the last IETF about the fact that events that aren't listed on the official IETF meeting calendar are hard to track down. It's hard to keep track in your calendar of what's happening when. And as we've made it easier for people to sign up in a first come, first served manner for the side meeting space, those meetings have become popular, and it's getting a little bit hard to organize. So what we did this time was we provided a single wiki for those signups so that people could have them in one place. And we also published an ICS calendar so that people could incorporate it into their own calendaring software. We've been very careful to label these as unofficial side meetings because they do continue to be unofficial, not sanctioned by the IESG or the IETF, and we're intending to maintain that separation in order so that people are clear about that. This is another experiment, so please send us your feedback about this and how we can make it better. And lastly, we once again had the request for RFC session on Sunday night, hot RFC conversation. So the idea of this is to have short lightning talks. I think this time they were 4 minutes long, for people to find collaborators, to raise awareness about new areas of work that they're intending to pursue, and to promote barb-offs and side meetings. It was a packed house on Sunday, lots of really interesting talks, 200 attendees. And the proceedings are available online. So if you weren't able to make it, you can check out the slides. Once again, we're open to feedback about whether we should keep doing this. It did seem quite popular this time. Aaron Falk is the organizer, so huge thanks to him for putting in the effort there. As he said at the end of the session, people have kind of thoughts about having it at a different time or having it in closer proximity or further away from the newcomers reception and other events that happen on Sunday. So we would appreciate your feedback about all of that. Next, we have an update on the IETF Administrative Support Activity 2.0. So for those who have not been following along, this is the effort to refactor the IETF's administrative structure. In August, we created something called the IETF Administration LLC, which is what is called a disregarded entity of ISOC. It's its own legal entity that is now housing the administration and fundraising for the IETF. We have a working group called IASA2, which is developing and documenting all of the changes to our process documents that we need in order to essentially effectuate this transition from our previous administrative structure to the new structure. As you can see, this working group has a very long document queue. Our previous structure, we had the IEOC, and so we have a lot of documents where we need to replace the text about the IEOC with text about the LLC. So many of these documents have small or minimal changes, but some of them have big changes because the IEOC and the previous structure were very much embedded in some of our processes. So you can follow along that working group if this is of interest to you. It's going to be churning out a lot of process document updates, hopefully in the next months. And Finally, just a quick reminder about our standards of professional behavior. The IETF strives to maintain an environment in which everybody feels welcome and in which everybody is treated with dignity and respect. And we have that documented in RFC 7154. We have a series of guidelines and policies for cases where you need guidance, where you need to know what to do, need to understand what our policies are. And that includes policies around anti-harassment and our meeting photography policy, which was established earlier this year to allow people an opt-out for having their photo taken. You can reach the Ombuds team, our crew of 3 who will field complaints and concerns from people about behavior at the meeting. Their address is on the slide. And that's it from me. There's a lot more online. We publish a report in advance of every IETF meeting, so you can see that in the data tracker. It covers a few other topics. We had one appeal over the summer, and we sent a response to that appeal, and you can read about it there, find the links. And there's also lots of reports from all of our other parts of the organization, IAB, IEOC, RFC Editor, Secretariat, IANA, NOC, and a report about the hackathon. I also encourage people to check out the IETF blog. We have contributions from people all the time talking about different technologies that are getting developed in the IETF. And we usually also have a preview in advance of the IETF meeting and a summary afterwards. So please go visit the blog. And with that, I'd like to ask Ted Hardy to come on up and talk to us about the IAB.
Howdy. So this is the IEB report for IETF 103. Some recent activity. There was a request at the last IETF that the IEB make its agendas public and that it make the meetings open to observers. Those are both now our current practice. The first link, if you've downloaded this, is to the agendas, and the second is to a subscribable calendar, which will enable you to keep track of when they are and how to dial in. We've also had a couple of RFCs published. RFC 8477 was a report from the IATC workshop, which is the IoT Semantic Interoperability workshop, and RFC 8462, the report from the Marnu workshop, which was the Managing Radio Networks in Encrypted World. Both of those are very, very late. So we also sent out a question to the IETF community to see whether you would consider possibly as being a little bit more flexible on what our formats were for that. There's been some discussion on architecture discussed already, but you're welcome to join that discussion if you have opinions. The IAB also sent a comment to the Australian government on a forthcoming piece of legislation, the Australian Assistance and Access Bill. It's a little bit of a complicated issue, so I encourage you to read that comment. We also have made a number of appointments since the last IETF. We've appointed Tim Wazinski to the CCG, which advises the IETF Trust. We reappointed Ole Jacobson to the ICANN NOMCOM, and the RFC Series Oversight Committee has a new group there, headed by Sarah Banks as chair, with Tony Hansen, Adam Roach, Peter St. Andre, Robert Sparks, and Christian Wiedema as the current set of members. As you can tell, we're always looking for volunteers for this and that. The next set of volunteers we're looking for is the ICANN TLG. We're looking for folks to join the IAB's internal plenary planning program. Melinda Shore, who's here, would be a good person to talk to about that. We will also be looking for a new IRTF chair because the current incumbent has let us know that she'll be standing down at the next IETF. It's not issued yet, but we are coming up on the time when the IEB also issues a call for the ISOC Board of Trustees. As you know, the IEB is responsible for selection of 1 or 2 trustees in any particular year. This is a 1 year. We also have 2 workshops in preparation, one called Escape, which is focused on web packaging, and one called SIPE, which is thinking a great deal about consolidation and asymmetry. So we look forward to folks participating in those. You can always send email to the IEB, either to the IEB itself at ieb@idp.org or to the architecture discuss list if you'd like to be part of a larger public conversation. Thanks very much.
Won't touch it again. Glenn and Portia.
Hi, everyone. So I get a chance to actually be nice and offer thanks again to our host, our global host. Well, not our global host, but our host for this meeting, Huawei and Cisco. We really appreciate you. It's hard to see you from up here and on this podium, but we really do appreciate everything that you've done to make this meeting happen for us in 103. For this meeting, as Alyssa mentioned, it took a lot to get acclimated to Bangkok, and we could not have put this meeting on without the help of THNIC Foundation. They were instrumental in getting our letters of invitation done for us, and also securing local sponsors for us. So it was instrumental in doing that, and we really appreciate everything. In the THNIC Foundation representative that helped us out was Kanchana Sutton, and we really appreciate that. Additionally, THNIC Foundation helped us with securing our gold sponsor in BTC, and some of you may have seen them as we gave them a visit and a tour of the IETF, and they were very interested in learning about our community and how it works, and interested in being more involved in having the IETF come back to Bangkok. Our silver sponsors, Microsoft, and our gold sponsor, the Best VPN, and of course, our connectivity sponsors, with them, they were able to get our circuits into the Marriott Marquis on time, and BKNEC, NTT Communications, and True. I mentioned earlier that THNIC Foundation was instrumental in getting local sponsors. Those sponsors, 3BB, NTT Communications, and TCC. We were also supported by TCEB, and they were very helpful, especially towards the end, by providing the opportunity for the IETF meeting to be listed on their MICE calendar, which really made a big difference in the visa process for some of our attendees. So that was major for us. And for a successful hackathon, Cisco, DevNet, and NBC Universal. Our sisters lunch sponsors, Fastly, Comcast, and NBC Universal. Of course, we have a list of volunteers who give their time in the code sprint. We really appreciate everything that goes into the work for the code sprint by our volunteers. And for the NOC and all the volunteers that we have for them, led by Jim Martin, and appreciate their work. Our vendors, Line Speed and Rick, led by Rick Alfred, and Meet Echo for our remote access. We invite those of you who are interested to please visit tomorrow. The host speaker series will be Challenges of Evolution Towards Autonomous Network. Please stop by if you can. And our next meeting will be IETF 104 in Prague, March 23 through 29. We do have a co-host already lined up, but we are looking for another co-host to share, bringing that meeting to Prague. And you can please visit or get in contact with Ken Boyden, who's in the audience someplace, and he's standing up. Thank you. And our future meeting venues are here. Prague, Montreal 105, 106 will be Singapore, 107 Vancouver, 108 Madrid, and 109 is Asia, 110 Europe, and then 111 we will be in San Francisco. And we are actually very fortunate to have sponsors for at least 4 of those meetings. And again, if you see an opportunity that you're interested in, that your business might be interested, your company, please see Ken Boyden. Thank you. And also, I didn't do it throughout my presentation, but if we could just take a minute to applaud and thank all of our sponsors, I'd really appreciate that. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Glenn Dean, and I'm the currently chair of 2 groups here at the IETF. At the end of this meeting, I'm going to be down to 1 chair slot because we're going to kill off one of these committees by the end of this presentation. I'm the chair of the IAOC, and I'm also the chair of the IETF Administration LLC now. As Alyssa mentioned, back in August, we created the LLC. It was actually legally done, and the papers were signed and filed in Delaware, and we became a legal entity. That was a big step for us. If people remember, it was just about 1.5 years ago, I think, that we started the ISA2 working group up, and we made a lot of progress in a very short period of time. John Peterson and Jason Livingood are the co-chairs of the ISA working group, and they've done a really great job at shepherding all that work through. So what does it mean that we become an LLC? And I'll be very quick about this. It means that we are now a legal entity that can sign contracts for ourselves. In the past, ISOC had to sign all the contracts for the IETF. We are able to take donations directly. We are able to hire staff and contractors and do resource planning for ourselves. And we have our own budget that we have to live within. So it's going to be fun going forward. Couple changes that were brought about by the ISA2 and the LLC creation. First of all, under the IOC, we had an IAD. And that in the past was Ray Pelletier, and Portia Danley has been the interim IAD for the last, a year now? And that is, the IAD position has been eliminated and it has been replaced by the IETF Executive Director. And so Portia's title going forward is the IETF Executive Director. She will be filling that as an interim position. The permanent position of that will be for the permanent board when it's filled in IETF 104. One of their tasks is to select who will be their permanent long-term director, and they'll be doing an executive search process for doing that position. So the other big change was that the IOC has gone away. There is been replaced by a board of directors. Currently, it's structured to have 5 members, and additionally, the board can appoint 2 additional members if they find they need 2 more, but there's 5 core ones. One is chosen by the IESG, one is chosen by the ISOC Board of Trustees, and 3 of them will be chosen by NOMCOM. And that process is going on right now, so if you are interested in commenting on that, Scott is putting stuff out, and I think he's going to speak. get out the vote, get out there, vote, and tell us what you think about the trustees, or sorry, the people that have put their name in for the non-com position appointed for the LLC board. The current board, we needed an interim board to start this whole thing up. And so what was done was the chair of the IOC, the chair of the ISG, the chair of the IAB, and the chair of the ISOC Board of Trustees were essentially given that task. And we've been going through the steps of all the sort of startup initial stages, making some very basic decisions. But our main mission is to transition from the creation of the LLC, keep the lights on, do the minimum that we have to, and establishing that organization. And our plan is to hand it off when the full board is actually seated around IETF 104, and then they'll take up from there and do all the hard work. So I told you, I gave a bit of a spoiler, we are killing off the IOC. So this actually serves as the last meeting the IOC will be around. And so their names of the last IOC is on the page there. I wish to thank all of them for their great service, and I think we're going to be doing something a little bit later about that. The big thing that's going on right now, the reason we haven't killed off the IOC the first time that the LLC got spun up, was that it turns out that people very cleverly said for the IETF trust, we put in the rules that to be an IETF trustee, you had to be a member of the IOC. And so if we had turned off the lights on the IOC back in August, it turns out the IETF trust, all the trustees would have vanished and there would have been no trustees for the trust. So we've been busily updating those legal agreements. That work is done. And so now we're able to finally sunset the IOC. There's a detailed report up on the website. There's a new website for the LLC board. It's integrated now with the revamped IETF site that was done a little while ago. And all our meeting reports are up there. I'll make one additional comment about our meeting reports. We are very committed to true transparency. And so one of the first resolutions we did as a board was to say that our meetings will be public. And so they are public. They are posted up on that webpage. You can come, you can join, you can listen in. The only time we close them is when we have to go into executive session to talk about things like finances, which unfortunately we have to spend a lot of time talking about in an administrative oversight group. I'd like to talk a little bit about numbers. So one of the things we worry about in the administration side is the budget. And so, as Alyssa said, the numbers for this meeting are down attendance-wise. And I want to talk a little bit about the numbers in terms of registrations and in terms of revenue, because one of the big changes we had coming into IETF 103 was that we actually changed the breakdown of what you pay to come to the IETF meeting and when the various cutoffs were for early bird, standard registration, and late fees. So the numbers today, as of today, we have 833 paid attendees. We had actually projected for 157 more people to attend. We have issued 261 letters of invitation to come attend here. And our total revenue, which is the number we pay attention to in the LLC, is $611,000 was raised through paid attendees. And that is 53,000 less than we had projected. But it's not a bad number. Given that we're actually 157 down, the new fee structure has actually helped us not be really, really negative on the revenue. So it's a bad number. Being under is never good, but it could have been far worse under the old structure. So the good news, by the way, is sponsorship is up. We actually were $40,000 over our projected target for sponsorship. So we've done pretty well in sponsorship. About the new fee structure, I just want to highlight this because this is brand new for IETF 103. And one of the things we were concerned about when we shifted over to it is, if you remember, we have the early bird rate, which is up to 7 weeks before the meeting. If you register, you get a rate of $700. After 7 weeks, up to 2 weeks before, you have a standard rate, which is $875. And if you have forgotten to register up to 2 weeks ahead, you're going to pay $1,000. And this is the breakdown. It turns out that we got the word out successfully. People did hear about the early bird. They were able to register early on. That first batch, we did encounter a couple glitches with the new registration system. Fortunately, the secretary was very quick to jump on that problem and fix it and make it go away, and the rest of the registration went without a hitch. So thank you, secretary, for that excellent job. But we had 449 people successfully do the early bird, 240 do the standard rate, 73 did the late registration, and you can see the students, the one-day pass numbers, and that adds up to our number of 833. Thank you.
Okay, next we have IETF Trust. Kaveh.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kaveh Ranjwar, currently chairing IETF Trust and not an IOC member anymore. So, yes. So at the moment we have 8 trustees. Normally we have 9, but as you know, the latest IOC before shutting down had 8 members, so that's where we are. As Glenn mentioned, every IOC member basically had an option to become a trustee, and as far as I know, all of them has always been trustees. But then with the changes, we needed to make changes, again, as Glenn mentioned. So there were 2 drafts, and they have been approved for publication yesterday. Have a look. It basically changes the structure of how appointments are made to the trust. There are 5 trustees after this is in effect. And the IETF trust agreement and trust administrative procedures have been updated to basically reflect what's in those documents. INA domain transfer is also complete. That was done earlier this year. It was by design a slow process because we wanted to do all kind of tests and did them one by one. But now you own basically IANA.com, net, and org. And the 2019 trust budget is already passed. The funding is moved from, or will be moved from ISOC to LLC. So traditionally, trust was funded by ISOC. This year, we also had some other funding members. We just seek out other organizations, and we have received 2, and we hope that we receive another 2 contributors before end of the year. If you download the slides, you will find the full budget or summary budget basically at the end of the slides. And yeah, if you want to be a trustee, the NOMCOM is looking for nominees. The nominations are open until November 28th. So please sign up if you're interested to become a trustee. And basically that's it. Cheers.
Kaveh didn't say is that being a trustee involves very little work. So if you're up for very little work, then please put your name in for the NOMCOM selection for the trust. Speaking of which, the next update comes from the NOMCOM. Scott.
Like I'm Mr. Rogers. Hi. I didn't realize this meeting was in Minneapolis. Anyway, I want to thank the previous speakers for actually doing my job for me. So this, yes, please get out and vote. So this is the NOMCOM update for IETF 103, and unfortunately the color didn't turn out. That's supposed to be an orange dot, not to confuse people, but that is the sorting hat. And like I did at the last time, I like to have a theme that this presentation's about and we are currently in what I call the spinning wheel part of the process. And for those old enough to understand what spinning wheel means, you'll see when I get to the slide. So first off, it's of course yeehaw time for herding the cats. You can see that's me on the horse there, and the people there, that's not just the NOMCOM members and the NOMCOM advisors, but it's also the entire community. We're trying to get people together and move them in the same direction. So this is our composition this year. So if you're a NOMCOM member, please stand up right now because it's a lot of work and we need to appreciate the people that are doing it. So thank you very much. So for those of you who haven't seen the 250,000 announcements I've sent out, I wanted to point out the website. so that we can continue to receive some feedback. And it's like, I'm serious, like, look here, go to this part of the website. There have been some issues with people sending things to past chairs. I wanted to make sure everybody knows it's 2018. So make sure that's in the address that you're clicking on. And it's a very simple interface. I mean, the tooling that we have to support the NomCom this year is excellent. And so if you want to nominate somebody, we currently still have some nominations that are open. I'll show you what those are on the next slide. And if you want to provide feedback, I'll talk about that. And then if you are really interested in applying for something, there's always a way you can look at the desired experience that we're looking for, and also the questionnaires and the gauntlet that the people that are actually running for these positions have to go through. So we currently have 3 waves this year. The top wave is the wave that we have for the IETF chair, IESG area directors, and IEB. And I tried to make this color coded and make it very simple to follow, but we do this basically, this is a slimmed down version, but it's basically 5 things that have to happen. We nominate, we gather feedback, we do the interviews, we deliberate, and then we deliver the slate to the confirming body. So where we are with the IETF chair, IESG, and IEB, we have closed nominations. We're currently in the middle of we closed feedback. We didn't close feedback. We're still taking feedback. I'll fix that. Anyway, we're in the process of doing the interviews, and we are deliberating already about all the material that we had. And you'll see when I get to a slide that's coming up just how much material we have to work with. And I want to thank the community for providing it. For the LLC board member, the nominations are now closed. The feedback opens today. Okay, so if you have feedback that you want to provide on the slate of people that have signed up to be LLC board members, then now is the time to start, and you can use that slide that I had a couple ago and click on the right link and go and provide feedback. And the feedback closes in January. We'll start running the interviews sometime late November, early December. And then we'll deliberate, and then we need to deliver the slate to the confirming body by February. And then for the IETF Trust, we just opened nominations for that. We currently have 2. We need more than 2. We're being asked to fill 3 slots, so I would at least like to have 3. So please consider that. Go beat up people. And like they said, it even says in the job description, this is not a lot of work. Okay. And then so we'll open up feedback and go through the rest of the process. So I just wanted to let you know where we are in the process of the various waves. So what do I want you to do? What do I need to happen? My plea, very important. It's so important that I have a slide near the end of this presentation that says almost exactly the same thing. And that is, we need community feedback for IETF chair, IESG, and IEB. It closes on November 16th, which is next Wednesday. Okay, so we need more feedback. Well, we don't need more feedback. Let me put it this, we want more feedback. And we also have office hours. We have 1 more set of office hours tomorrow, if you want to just drop by and say hi. And then we have a cappuccino espresso machine, just we're saying it. And we have a bowl of apples that I don't think anybody's eaten. The community feedback for LLC board members now open! Exclamation point. So please take that into consideration. We're really looking for information about what you think is important for people that are going to be leading this LLC board. Remember, we're looking for people that have experience running things, not necessarily people that want to dive deep into the details of a technical problem. These are the business managers and board members we're looking for. So trust nominations open, more nominations are needed. And this is directed at everybody that signed up to be an LLC board member. Get your questionnaires filled out and put in the system, please. It's hard to deliberate if we have no information on you. Otherwise, we will just make up stuff, and you don't want that. So blood, sweat, and tears. Now we know why it was called Spinning Wheel, right? With the theme of this is getting the work done in the room with and coming up with doing the deliberations for what we need to do. In IETF 102, I talked about the community. Come on, we need to be extraordinary. Look around the room. This is the group that you need to take care of. This is your community. You need to take it seriously and really provide the NOMCOM with people that can do the job, and then comments on who you think are the most qualified people to do the job. This time, the theme is getting the work done. So what I'm asking from the community is to keep the momentum up and participate in the process. If you don't like the way something's done, if you don't like the way NOMCOM works, if you like something, provide feedback. We have the ability to provide feedback that's of a general nature in the tooling. If you click on view feedback, down at the bottom, there's some topics. And if you're interested in filling out some of those topics and providing feedback, put it in there. And so the theme of this time also is look around the room. It's very important to talk to one another, very important to keep the conversation civil. Make yourself a community and provide the feedback that we need to do what we need to do. Because there's a room full of engineers, I do have to provide some statistics because everybody else has statistics on their side, so I needed some statistic slides. So what I did is I looked at some numbers from the past 4 NOMCOMs, and this is an example of the type of data that we can receive. And the thing that a couple things I'd like to point out here. One is under the comment line. If you look down at the bottom, that says 717. I took this picture yesterday. We're now at 800 and something. So the community is really providing us with a lot of feedback in a lot of different areas. But what I wanted to point out are a couple things, and it's like there is a trend, and we know about it, and we understand, and we're taking this very seriously, that there are positions where we have a lot of nominees and then very few people accept the nomination. So we're trying to figure out why that is. We have speculation, but this is something that we would like to have a conversation about with the community. And there's actually a topic in the NOMCOM or on the feedback page that allows you to say, if you didn't accept the nomination, why didn't you accept the nomination? So we can gather that information and try to figure out if there are things that we can change. Another thing that we can point out here is that there are places where we had very few nominees, or we're at a position like in routing and in ops where we have the number of slots that we have or the number of people that accept it. That makes our job fairly easy for those as long as the candidates are qualified, right? So this is why we're constantly asking for a large pool to work from, because then it makes the NOMCOM jobs harder, but the community will end up with better leadership at the end. So some of these, boy, this color didn't turn out so good. But what I wanted to show are 2 different ways of looking at the data, or in one which I would call a healthy way it looks, and one that is less healthy that we need to start looking at. And one is where you've got a number of accepted members that's more than the number of people that decline. Right? You know, I thought that was just very nice. And then if you look at some other areas, there are very few people there that accept and a large number that decline. So we're not just picking on it. That's the one that I just happened to see. But this is one of my favorite, and it's really hard to see. But what if you look at that line that starts around 40 and goes to 38? These are the percentage of people that decline. The only group of people that seem to stay below 50% of the people declining is IAB. There are some that have a very large number of people that decline. So we just like to figure out why this is. So this is my penultimate slide. So the thing I would like to do here is to thank the community for your response. You've done a great job. And it's great to have feedback on the candidates and keep up the work. And I want to really seriously thank the people that have accepted the call to run and are going through the process of sitting in rooms with us, going through the questionnaire, going through the interviews. We've had a number of people that are providing us debrief information. All of that is very great. And then, so the last slide. So again, I said I was going to ask again, what I need y'all to do is keep the feedback coming, find great candidates for the trust. And as I said before, I know this community can be extraordinary, so I have faith that we're going to exceed the expectations that I have for this. So I thank you very much. Do I take questions? I mean, there's someone standing at the mic, so. I don't hear you. You can ask a question, but I need to hear it.
Technology. Here you go. Well, thank you. So I'm Spencer Dawkins. Thank you, Scott, for an informative report. Did I see that you did not have a red circle around TSV with one?
Well, no, I didn't. Again, it said on the slide, it's like, this is just meant to spark a discussion, not necessarily right now.
No.
But yeah, that is an excellent, I mean, I could have circled everything with some color, one or the other. I was just pointing out a few things.
No, I was just, I thought you were circling the ones with one,
No.
with one nominee. Yeah, so I just wanted to say, you kind of showed up in March last year and said you're worried about this, and your greatest dreams were realized.
Yes.
I was talking, Mary and I were talking with the transport area working group chairs and with the review team on Monday night about this, and a couple of data points popped into our minds. And please tell me if I'm getting this right. But we were saying, oh, well, there's these positions with only one person, that's the willing nominee. But routing, there's two positions and two nominees. So having two nominees is not as reassuring as we might have wished.
Right.
But the larger thing, basically, and this is why I was talking to the working group chairs in transport and to the review team who are senior participants, is that this is not your problem to solve, and it's actually not Alyssa's problem to solve either. This is a community problem, and it is a big problem, and it's not going to, I was on the hook to write updates for the last, for the last 2 years for the NOMCOM process, and they were small updates, and they didn't happen because we were relying on an ISG member to do things, and we all know what that means. So, like I say, thinking we need some more community thought about this and conversation about this in order for us to get to a better place. I asked the transport area working group chairs to think really big, really outside the box. And it wasn't quite at the level of, do you guys need a transport area director at all? But it was, what from that? Because not only do we have one nominee, we have one nominee who served before. Right. So it's like, this is what it looks like this is what it tastes like when you eat seed corn. How many more times do we think this is going to come back? Magnus is a young guy. Lars is also a transport area working group chair who has served with Magnus. And his eyes got very big when I started talking about bringing back past area directors as returning area directors. You've never seen fear like that in a man's eyes in my life. But I mean, it's like, I'm 64 years old. I'm not coming back in 4 years. So I mean, this is not a winning plan. So this is a good time for the community to be talking before the next. What do you want to do before the next nominating committee is seated? And let's say, let's make up some number like June or whenever it is. But it's
I will slip the money to you on the way out the door. I'm really glad that you feel that way, because that's exactly the way I feel too.
to prove that you're a good man and that good deeds are rewarded, I'm actually too tired to carry money tonight.
Yeah.
So please keep it and spend it on the nominating committee
Okay.
members.
So I think, Sean?
Yeah, hey Scott, this is Sean Turner. I'll be real quick. It's more of a statement. There's somebody called Shauna Turner that's standing for the LLC board.
Yeah, that's
not me.
Not him.
I had 4 people who know me ask me, so just FYI.
Excuse me. Yeah. Hi, Melinda Shore. Spencer had a very hard question. I've got a really easy one. On the IAB nominees, there were 20 accepted nominations and 21 returned questionnaires.
Yes, because we've had, we've had some, I had some tooling problems that were my own doing. So it's, that's okay. There's not 21 questionnaires in there. I think there's a questionnaire in there that's in there twice.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Shh. So thank you very much. That was it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So I think that was a great demonstration of if you really want to improve your sense of humor, then get stuck in a room 10 hours a day, no windows, having to interview people and deliberate, and you end up even funnier than you were to begin with. Thank you so much, Scott and the NomCom, for all the work that you're putting into this process. And just briefly in response to what Spencer said, we talked about this a little bit in the IESG the last couple of weeks. And personally, I think we actually need to not put ourselves on the clock for June, but think about kind of take a longer term view of some of the issues that Scott was raising. It's really, really hard to make adjustments between March and June. And for people who've been around in the community for a long time, you know that this is a persistent issue, not just this year, but going back many years. So hopefully that's something that we can work on together in the next little while. And with that, we'll turn it over to Heather.
Unfortunately, I can't knit fast enough. Right. So it's been a while since I've actually been on stage. I have been submitting reports, and I'm sure all of you have been reading them with breathless anticipation for me actually to come up with like real code for the format work. How many of you know that I've been working on changing the RFC format? Thank you. Thank you. Be here all week. So for those of you that are new to the IETF and or otherwise have perhaps missed the memo, I've been working on changing the RFC format from plain text ASCII only documents to something that's a little bit more flexible and allows a bit of a better representation of what the modern internet is. The underlying format is XML. That's pretty darn common in the publishing world as it transforms reasonably well into a variety of formats. The formats that we are going to be working on are text, PDF-A3 is the archival target, and HTML with an actual proper CSS and all that other good stuff. SVG line art in black and white. No, there will not be color. If you really want to know why there's not color, I point to some of the slides that we've had today where people say, wait, those colors don't, huh? Yeah, color is really hard. We're also looking to allow non-ASCII characters. All of the specifications were drafted and published a couple years ago. I think it's like RFC 7991 through 7998 or something like that. And there's an FAQ, which I periodically update if you're curious about some of the underlying thoughts that went into all of this work. This slide makes me happy because instead of having a lot of here are tools that we are thinking about or think we need to have or are working on contracts for, et cetera, there's a list of here's the stuff that is now released to the community that you can see. It's not production yet. No, I'm not going to let you post something tomorrow with, publish an RFC with SVG in it yet. But if you want to start playing with the tools and seeing what that looks like, you can start doing that now. For the stuff that's in progress, where it says prep tool, think IDNITs. IDNITs and the last publication formatter to get the PDF done. HTML was actually added to the XML to RFC v2.12 release last week. You can actually be playing with some of that over on the experimental page for the XML tools page for XML to RFC. What does that look like? I'm not doing a live demo because you all can run code yourself. But to give you a quick glimpse as to what we're talking about, what is it really going to look like? This is a screenshot from my screen using my browser at the size I normally use it at. So you can see a table of contents on one side. You see content, you see it actually laid out in something that's perhaps a little bit more in the way of attractive. However, if I squish my screen down, you see, things that the internet figured out how to do 15 years ago, where the table of content disappears and becomes a menu that you can work with. There is JavaScript. JavaScript is not required to read the documents, but it is there for people who have not turned on NoScript and want to use some of the features of the web. That's sort of the biggest news that I have with regards to the format work. If you were in the working group chair's lunch, you got to see a little bit more in the way of gory details in terms of transition plans. If folks here in the audience who weren't there are curious, what we're looking at is 6 to 9 months before we're actually going into production on this. What else did we do on our summer vacation? We did participate in the first half of an experiment on, well, what does GitHub look like from a copy editor's perspective? It was a bit time consuming, just a bit. But the document was published. This was RFC 8446 TLS13. We have not started the second half of the experiment. I mean, for something like this, you can't do it one time and then make firm decisions as to, oh, well, that we did it one time, therefore this is how it's always going to be. So we do want to do this again with another document that perhaps is not as long or challenging. And we're working with the ISG to identify the correct next target. The Jessup draft was there as a contender. We're still talking about that. There's a couple other drafts that may work a little bit better. So if you're curious as to what was the process that we followed, there's a link here and you can go on my wiki and you can see what that looks like. We'll publish a final report once we get the second document done. And the last thing I have is, so in case folks are curious, my contract as RSC and the RPC/publisher contracts have been with the Internet Society, as all these related contracts are. And the assignment for these as well is looking to go to the IETF LLC. So that's something that's in progress now. And I'll be up with the IAB for open mic if you have questions.
Okay, next up we have our IETF 104 preview.
Hi everyone, I am Láďa Lhotka and it's my pleasure to be able to present on behalf of CZ or CZNIC, anyway, to present Prague as the location for the next meeting, IETF 104. In fact, Prague has become the single most frequent location during the last decade or so. So I believe many of you, perhaps most of you, have already attended at least one meeting in Prague. I wonder how many, just raise your hands. Good. I could probably stop here. Well, anyway, those who have know pretty much well exactly what to expect. The venue will be the same as before, the Hilton Hotel, quite close to the historical center, and with a number of restaurants and pubs around. Well, the prices of meals in restaurants and beer, unfortunately, have risen since IETF 99. but I can assure you they are still going to be extremely pleasant. Of course, everywhere outside the Hilton Hotel itself. As for weather, during IETF 68, it was snowing and temperatures were close to the freezing point. So at that time, IETF folks in shorts and sandals were quite easy to recognize against the local population, I remember. On the other hand, temperatures in March can also be in the range of 20 plus degrees centigrade, which is 70, 75 Fahrenheit. So be sure before you leave to check the weather forecast. But I can promise you meeting room temperatures will be higher than here. Well, I have a couple of slides showing some places outside Prague. So take it as a tip for trips if you want to spend some days before or after the meeting. First is this nice castle is Karlstein that was built by the Emperor Charles IV in 14th century. And it also served for storing the imperial insignia long ago. This castle is quite close to Prague, southwest of Prague, and it's also reachable by train. Actually, the railroad track is pretty scenic, so that would be one recommendation. Then Český Krumlov is a picturesque medieval city in South Bohemia, so this is already a bit farther south from Prague, but it is a small city, very nicely located in along the banks of meandering Vltava River. And this town used to be the property of the Rosenberg family, who was opposed to the king most of the time. And they also wanted to show their property by building houses and castles that are even bigger than what the king did. They didn't quite succeed in this, at least not in Český Krumlov, because the Český Krumlov castle is only the second largest in the Czech Republic after the Prague castle, unfortunately. So nowadays Český Krumlov sort of suffers from excessive tourism, but still I believe it's worth visiting, although it's, as I said, it's a bit farther. And the third relatively small city is Kutná Hora, that used to compete for importance with Prague in 13th, 14th century, mainly thanks to the silver mines. There is no silver there anymore, but at least the architecture remained. What you can see here on this picture is the church of St. Barbara at Kutná Hora. Kutná Hora is east of Prague, some, I don't know, 30 kilometers, 40, maybe more, slightly. Now, and finally, I have a few slides showing places in Prague that are a little bit less known. So if you already know all the main dominants of Prague, these might be good places to go. Strahov Library is, I believe, one of the most beautiful libraries in the world, having over 200,000 books and other prints, and also some cabinet of curiosities from 17th century. But last but not least, next to the library is a very nice Strahov brewery, that brews a very tasty local lager, actually. So that's another place that I would recommend you to visit. Then, as you probably know, Cubism was started by Pablo Picasso and Georges Braque in Paris. But in fact, in early 20th century, there were quite a few followers and contributors to Cubism in Prague, painters, sculptors, architects as well. So I would recommend you to visit this nice cafe. And the house is called House at the Black Madonna. It's really very nice. Both the building and the furniture is in this style of Cubism. Very nice place. And finally, this is the real dominant of Prague, this TV tower. And of course, as it is the case with many such buildings and construction, it divides the Prague population in two parts. The tower is at the top of the Žižkov hill, and it's nicknamed the Rocket. So I believe the haters of this TV tower would love if the tower really flew away and never come back. But anyway, at the elevation of some 93 meters, you can find an observation deck with a beautiful view of the entire Prague and also a restaurant and so on. So that's my third tip for Prague. And that's all from me. Thank you very much for your attention. And see you in Prague.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the recognition portion. Glendine, that means you.
So we killed off a whole committee here this meeting. Yay. Claps. Long live the IOC is dead. But we don't want to let this moment pass without recognizing the people who served on this last IOC. So I'd like to call them individually up to the stage. I'd like to start with Alyssa Cooper. And what's particularly fun about this is it's signed by Alyssa and Glenn. Okay, could Ted Hardy please come up? And we'll try to be quick about this. I know it's no fun to watch everybody get a picture taken. Kaveh, would you come to the stage, please? No, I get to keep this one for now. John Levine. John Levine, are you in the room? There he is. And if we want to make this quick, there may be a few other people on the IOC who know themselves that may want to queue up over here, like Lou Berger and a few other people. Speaking of Lou Berger, get on up here. Thank you, Lou. Andrew Sullivan. Is there an Andrew Sullivan in the house? There he is back there. For those of you who don't know Andrew, this is Andrew. I don't know if you've met or have ever heard of the guy. He's the guy that took the cool job and made me the chair. Thank you, Andrew. And Portia, could you please come up? So by the way, this is in history, there was a total of 14 IOC committees from the time they got created to this point. Thank you. We're done with the photo portion of the show. All right. Or we have more photos taken?
Well, there's one more member of the IOC, Glenn. So we need to say thank you to you for being on the IOC. Done with the most thrilling part of the whole plenary right there. And on to the IAB open microphone session. So if the IAB could come on up.
All right. So those of you who are watching the screens on the side may have noticed that there are three PAC people who are joining us. That's because three of the IEB members needed to attend remotely. So we're going to start by having them introduce themselves.
This is Robert Sparks.
Brian Trammell, IEB.
Suzanne Wolf, IAB.
All right, Jeff, would you introduce yourself?
Jeff Tensor, IAB. Christian Wittema, IAB.
Melinda Shore, IAB.
Ted Hardy, IAB.
Alyssa Cooper, IAB.
London Thompson. Yari IAB.
Mark Nottingham, IAB.
Eric Nordmark, IAB.
Gabriel Montenegro, IAB.
Heather Flanagan, not IAB.
The mic lines are open. Please remember to say your name for the who are remote.
Hi, my name is Sean Turner. I just want to thank you, the IB, for showing restraint, for not just picking a random technical plenary and making us stay longer. So I'll sit down now. Thanks.
Almost as short as the technical plenary itself.
Niels de Noever, University of Amsterdam. Thanks IAB for publishing a new internet draft on consolidation. Even though I am very appreciative of you focusing on this topic, I think the draft has a few understandings that I might not necessarily share, such as that efficient markets enable winners to take large market shares. I think that's not really the understanding of how efficient markets work. And I think there are also other few problematic and also not consistent understandings of whether economy shapes technology or technology shapes economy and vice versa. So whether I think it's a great topic, I think we can do with a bit more analysis from an international political economy lens to make this work a bit better, and I think we'll be happy to contribute to that.
Yeah, so thank you for your interest and comments. So we've published the draft. I think it's actually a personal draft at the moment, but we are looking forward to progressing it. And part of the progressing is inviting other people to join the work, such as perhaps yourself. So we're soliciting for additional material and comments on this draft. There's been a discussion on the architecture discuss list. I welcome people to join that if you're interested in these sort of trends going on in the internet and discussing them. We are indeed also interested in getting more co-authors or text contributions for that document, and also in other ways interested in pursuing this topic. So one of the things that we've discussed but not put in the document too much yet is that there is a need to be able to measure how the internet is doing, for instance, in this centralization or consolidation trend, and any researchers who would be willing to look at various measurements on this space would be really welcome. So happy to take your feedback, and we can talk offline with the details. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Andrew Sullivan. So despite what Sean said about not picking a random topic and making everybody sit here longer, one of the things that I was liked about the plenary was when we had a successful technical topic, we had one that was, sort of large scale and allowed us to have this sort of cross-pollination of some of the ideas. Now that I have a job where I don't get to know anything anymore, I wonder whether there's some plan to revive the technical topic program so that you have the input queue that would allow that kind of success. Thanks.
Yes. Whoops. Okay. Yeah. Geez. Okay. We are soliciting members for the technical plenary program. And we are planning on having a technical plenary in Prague. So yeah, we've just had some problems pulling stuff together that we feel is of the quality that's needed for this audience and this circumstance.
The other comment I'll make is that we're also kind of considering starting to have technical meetings during the week, which are intended for smaller audiences than the whole of the IETF. One of the difficulties in finding good plenary topics is that there are some technical and quite meaty technical topics that fit only really at one or two layers of the Internet protocol development space, and therefore are not very interesting to folks who are not working in that space. And identifying those topics and having somewhat smaller meetings around them is something that we're also considering within the plenary planning program.
Hi, Aaron Falk. So I have been concerned about the drop-off in BOFs and new work in the IETF. And I'm asking you about this because the IAB, I think, sort of has this role of BOF shepherds. And so I'm thinking that maybe you guys are get some contact with people who might be thinking of bringing work here and maybe need some help. And I'm wondering if maybe there's a way, or maybe there already exists a way, where that information could be shared with the broader community, that there are people who are kind of interested in bringing stuff here, might need some help to, I'm sort of thinking this with the hot RC hat on. It's like maybe there's a way to try to broaden the pool of helpers beyond just the IAB and get some conversations going, and maybe making some of that information public would be helpful. And I realize this is as much a question for the ISG as it is for the IAB, but you guys are up there, so I'm asking you.
Well, I think maybe we'll ask Alyssa to take a whack at it then, since she's
So I think it's an interesting idea. The way the BOF Shepherd process actually typically works right now is that usually the IESG requests a BOF Shepherd from the IAB, so it's not the other way around. But obviously, anybody is welcome to propose new work, and if the IAB hears of new work happening first, then if they need some coordination with the ISG, we can do it, right? in terms of just the pipeline of new ideas, that as well is we've in the IHG have tried to make it more of an open process and tried to get the ideas in earlier. So this is something we asked for in the last round, and we actually changed the important meeting dates to try to hear about ideas sooner so that we could provide more help in terms of having successful BOF proposals and successful BOFs. I think the other thing, though, is that we have changed our way of working a little bit so that you don't need to have a BOF in order to have a working group chartered. And that's something that we're doing more and more, and that actually shortens the cycle and allows things to get started more quickly. So I think I would, at least my personal view is, would look at this more on a case-by-case basis. Like, are there these specific technologies where, you see them or you think other people are seeing them, like we're missing the boat and you would have thought they would have come to the IETF and they're not, as opposed to just looking at the gross numbers, because I think it's hard to compare over time because we've changed the way that we work.
Did changing the dates have any effect?
I don't think so. I think we got like one signal of a proposal that came in early, which would have perhaps come in at the same time if we even hadn't changed the dates. But as with anything in the IETF, you can't just try it once. You have to try it like at least 3 cycles to figure out if it has any effect. So I think we'll probably try it again and see.
Thanks.
So on this topic,
Please say your name.
Leif Johansson. Maybe it's time to relax the 2 BOF rule. I mean, clearly we don't have the same scaling issues we used to have in the 90s where there were 2,000 people in the same room, right? And some groups may just need a few more iterations to get things right.
So I think that's definitely a topic for the ISG, and for those of them who are in the room, I think they probably don't need you up at the mic again. But
Spencer Dawkins, coincidentally on the ISG. I wanted to, actually got up to thank you all for thinking about ways to do mini plenary stuff during the week, and just mention I wasn't here, wasn't in Montreal for the IETF 102 when the IRTF had the applied networking research workshop meeting during the IETF week instead of the weekend before, as it had been done in previous years. And I think that really helped to kind of cross-fertilize a lot of stuff. I think doing what you're talking about doing with smaller mini plenaries during the meeting week, that you'd be able to do more targeted things and stuff like that, that seems really, really positive. Because I was already standing here to say that, just responding to Aaron's thing, and please feel free to remember that we had this conversation when the ISG gets up there. But I was also freaked out about the number of BOFs that we had. I've convinced myself that when you look at the amount of people coming in for hot RFC, I mean, like, it's like we had a 200-person room, and I'm not sure that we weren't having people bouncing off because they couldn't find a seat. That's what a success looks like as far as I'm concerned. So, like, people are trying to do things. So I'm not worried about people finding their way here who want to do things. One of the other things that Mary and I talked about with our chairs was what we could do to help people who are trying to bring new work into the group. And I say this with love in my heart for the transport area. It seems like we're one of the ones that's been particularly difficult for people to come in, because everything was tried, 15 years ago and failed spectacularly. And it's just really, and nobody knows that because it failed so long ago, so that they keep bringing the same things in over and over again. After we talked about that, half that group showed up at the Loops side meeting on Tuesday night. And that was actually the most positive interaction I've ever seen out of transport with a new idea coming in. And I'm a guy that had 2 transport BOFs that didn't get chartered. So, I mean, I'm not a casual observer. We can do, I think, a better job of of training people. I've just mentioned also, I did with Aaliyah Atlas a tutorial on bringing new work to the IETF on Sunday night that has a lot of material in it that I've been talking about to the ISG and to the IAB over the past couple of years. I think it's educational, or I wouldn't have done it, but it might be informative to people who are thinking about what else we could do as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Spencer. Elliot?
Hi, Elliot Lear. In answer to Aaron, a couple of things I just want to point out. We had a really successful side meeting. Not everything that we work on here at the IETF has to turn into a working group or a BOF. And we had a really good meeting on IoT onboarding. Thanks, Christiane, for participating in it. We had, and Gabe also participated in it, which was great. For those people who are interested in the problem of the plethora of mechanisms that are proliferating across different standards bodies and indeed across working groups here, just drop me an email. But we're going to start a mailing list. Suresh is going to help me on that a little bit. And we're doing some GitHub gathering of information just to catalog all the different things that are going on. One other comment about the hot RFCs function. That was really successful, but it seems to me that the conflict of events that are going on Sundays is actually a big issue, because I think it's really helpful for you guys and for the IESG to actually show up. Some of you were obviously there, but the conflicts really do press upon your time, and I do realize that that's a big problem.
Okay, Lucy?
Lucy Lynch. I'm one of the people at the last meeting who asked for more transparency from the IAB, and I just want to say thank you for responding.
Okay, I don't see anybody else at the mic lines, so I think we move on. Would the ISG come forward, please?
Terry, can we start with you? Terry, can you introduce yourself, please? After you're done.
Sorry, I was freezing, trying to warm up. Terry Manderson, Internet Area.
Deborah Brungard, Browding area.
Eric Rescorla, Security.
Ben Kaduk, Security.
Ben Campbell, Application in Real Time.
Adam Roach, Application Real Time.
Alvaro Rotana, Routing.
Mia Kulivin, Transport.
Alyssa Cooper, General Area.
Ted Hardy, IAB Chair.
Ignas Bogdanas, Management and Operations.
Warren Kamari, Operations and Management.
I see what you did there. I'm Spencer Dawkins, outgoing Transport Area Director.
Martin Vigreux, Routing.
Suresh Krishnan, Internet.
Alexei Melnikov, Application in Real Time.
All right, mics are open, and we have first question. Wes.
Thanks. Wes Hardiker, ISI. I come to you today with my IETF Guides co-chair hat on. As hopefully most people know, the IETF Guides program is part of the EDU program and is responsible for introducing new IETF attendees to the procedures and the culture of the IETF. Our culture is unique in many positive and admittedly a few negative ways, and it is our job to bring new participants up to speed so they can actively participate in our working groups. I distinctly remember some vigorous, fiery conversations that occurred during the first working groups of the IETF I ever attended. I was fascinated by the immense passion transmitted at the microphone over what comes down to simply whether the ones or the zeros should come first. It was always fun to watch, and it made me wish I had brought popcorn. And it wasn't until later, though, that I realized that my entertainment came at the expense of others. Fortunately, the participants at the time had IETF well-hardened skins. I also distinctly remember shaking in my boots the first time I spoke in a microphone or gave my first presentation, concerned that some of that heated passion would be directed my way. Not because my ideas might be wrong, as I'm freely willing to admit that many of my ideas aren't perfect, but rather that the words would be directed at me rather than the technical accuracy of my work. Far too many times, still today, I've heard phrases like, "That's a stupid idea," instead of, "I think I see some technical flaws in your approach, can we talk about it?" There is a huge but subtle difference between telling somebody that they are wrong versus showing them where their thinking might have gone wrong. So, to the IETF participants, both seasoned and newcomers alike, I ask you to carefully consider the wording that you use in email or at the microphones. Pause and reread before you hit send, and use the time in the microphone lines to compose your phrasing so you concentrate on the technical message. It's a skill that takes time to develop. Even when you're speaking to somebody that you know has an IETF-worthy skin thickness, be aware that you're still likely impacting somebody else's eagerness to participate in hearing those words. To the document authors, I ask a simple question. What will you do to ensure that when the time comes that your document goes to last call, that enough people will stand around willing to review it? To the working group chairs, I encourage you to build an environment where participation grows over time with active, constructive debate, rather than shrinks under the weight of toxic statements. And to the IESG, I ask, what tools can you provide to the working groups and the chairs that allow consensus to be built rather than shut down? And finally, to the newcomers, I thank you for bringing the extent of this issue to our attention. Your stories have been eye-opening and frankly, many of them purely shocking. We all will retire someday and stop participating in the IETF. Please help me ensure that our work, our culture, and our distinct process of engagement through consensus remains in place long into the future. Encourage our new participants through example and how to engage in vigorous but technically focused debate. It's okay to be passionate. Just consider carefully where and how that passion is directed. Thank you.
Can I ask you something?
Of course.
For any of the incidents that you noted yourself or that you heard about, did you use any of the kind of escalation mechanisms that we have available?
You know, I was thinking about that very question earlier today as I was writing this up, and I realized I think I failed that process as well. And to be perfectly honest, I'm quite sure I've been on the negative attitude side. You know, nobody's perfect. I just ask us all to look at ourselves carefully and see if this is really how we want to behave. But no, I did not. And I do encourage the people that have talked to me to please do bring your stories to the ombudsman or things like that. There's some interesting ones that have happened.
Thanks. Yeah, I just asked because I think you asked about tools and the greatest tool that we have is just the culture that we build, right? This place is what we make it. And I think to some extent, one thing that I've noticed is that when you put that hat on, like you did the IETF Guides hat, you think about this through the lens of the newcomer. But I think a lot of times people who have been around here for longer, you get to know each other really well, and you don't think about applying the same standard evenly to everybody, even your good friends who you know, even yourself, right? And so I think the more that we exercise some of those tools, it sets an example for how everybody needs to behave and how everybody should be treated, and that there's no distinction between whether it's your first day at the IETF or it's your 100th meeting. So. Other people have any responses? Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of validity to what you say. I've introduced a bunch of new people and specifically had to warn them, don't mind if you see people shouting at each other at the mic. Chances are they're going to go off and have beers after that. But that's not a reasonable thing to have to warn people about. One thing that I think would be a good way to help sort of mitigate some of this is to simply remind people when they start doing that sort of behavior that it's probably not particularly friendly for newcomers who come along. Just sort of at the end of it, be like, those things you said, I agree with them, but possibly you could have worded it in a way that wasn't quite so confrontational. Like, this is a culture that we build ourselves, and sometimes just pointing things out to people helps.
Well, you draw an important point to one thing that I tried to put into my statement, which I rarely read statements, but this was far too important to get wrong. So there is a culture of people that know each other well and are willing to yell at each other, and they have the thick skins, and you'll see them drinking a beer an hour later. And I tell that story a lot of times to newcomers. The problem is that those types of statements prevent newcomers from standing up, worried that that same passion, will be directed at them before they have the skin that they're used to. So be careful that even if you're good friends fighting at the microphone, and you and I, for example, would love fighting at microphones, we're really good at it, but yeah, I'm all wrong most of the time. But the reality is that will prevent newcomers from participating, and that's a real problem.
Thank you. Yep. Yep.
So I just wanted to thank Wes for serving in the role that he's serving, because I suspect, and please take this as a compliment to the community, our increased awareness of how difficult we are to live with is because we started paying attention to it. It's not because it got worse, but because we started noticing. And I really, so we've been, doing things with newcomers for the past 2 or 3 years. But, now we have someone, who, so, this is a process for everybody, so like the next step in the process was feeding back to us and to the community what you're hearing, which I don't know that I'd heard that a lot from previous IETFs. So I really appreciate that. When I started attending, I'm sure there were people even back then that didn't know what to do with it and kind of went away. And, but like they kind of vanished without a ripple. And, so what you're talking about here is giving us us and the community a better awareness of the way it looks from the other end of the room. And I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I need to point out my co-chair, Niels, where are you? Stand up some. I don't do this alone. He is the other person that you are welcome to come talk to about newcomer-related introductions.
Thank you. Kathleen?
Kathleen Moriarty, this is a little easier, maybe. 5 or 6 years ago, a new AD was added to routing, and when apps and PRI were combined into art, we had 3 ADs. So I'm wondering, how is that working in each of the areas? Is it still necessary? Is there a plan for change, either in other areas or those? So I have no idea, not being, not having insight to the discussions, but is this something that was discussed, seeing that there's, 2 openings for routing and only 2 people who I think are doing a great job, just figured it was a good time to raise the question. Yep. Art's going first, it looks like.
So we actually had a conversation, the 3 of us, earlier, either today or yesterday, about the fact that the work in art is kind of contracting. I mean, there was this huge wave that came through with the WebRTC work. That was kind of, this is bulge moving through the snake. And we're about to put the last bits of those documents into the RFC editor queue. And there's a good chance that come a year from now, we will probably be looking at going from 3 to 2 in art. So just as a practical matter. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, so this is Ben. I agree with everything Adam said. We had that conversation, and I think it's highly likely, unless we see a big uptake, that we will at least talk about going to 2. At the same time, I've really enjoyed having 3, from the idea of having 2 people to bounce things off of. I found that very helpful. I mean, one other person to bounce things off of is great, but 2 people is more than twice as good from just the way the group works together. I realize it doesn't scale to have everyone have 3, but I've enjoyed it.
Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to, basically Ben stole my lines. I think it worked very well for 3 of us. So I'm very pleased. And also the two areas merging in general worked very well. So more people participating on both sides of the regional areas. So that's all good.
Yeah, in the routing area, we talked about it because we were thinking about it, and we still have a huge publication queue from each of the groups. And by having the three of us, we hope we're keeping that queue down, that we're getting things fast through without having long delays. So we decided definitely we keep it going, even though I closed actually one of my groups, and so we'll keep looking at it. But I think it's really important to get the queue going, right? That we don't have long queues, long window delays. So I think that's the most important thing versus saying to give three.
I think the other thing that has been working for us in routing is that by having the three, it also gives us time to do other things related to the AD job. So like routing security, for example, worry about that and keep a closer eye on topics like that, of course, all the important things, right? So that is important for us as well. We actually talk about this periodically and usually talk about it a little bit more when it comes time to submit descriptions and everything else to the NOMCOM. But yes, I think for now, it is the right number to have in routing.
Thank you. Glad that you're discussing.
Could I just, yeah, so I'm kind of answering as funny story. I'm the guy who wrote the RFC that gave us 3 AD areas, although transport doesn't have one. But when I was working on that RFC, on the draft that became that RFC, I talked to Scott Bradner, and he was talking about a proposal that he had done coming off the ISG low these many years ago. And the idea was basically that you had most of the ISG working at large. In Scott's mind, ops was always ops and security was always security, but that it would be better if the ISG was, if the other directors were serving at large. We've got a little bit of the ability to do that now because you could have an area director that's not for the area that your working group is. And that happened when Benoit was doing so much work with Yang. So we've got the capability to do that. A little, the tools support it. When a transport area director was not chosen in 2013, it was very difficult for the one remaining area director because the tools didn't support assigning working groups outside the area. There had to be a one-to-one mapping. That work was done to support Benoit moving to work on Yang. But like I say, it's just, and that's the kind of thing I'm talking about with the community having a conversation with itself about what we could do. That doesn't require a BCP change. That's the only thing that's required there is the descriptions we send to NOMCOM.
Thank you. Thanks. Benoit?
So good evening. So I like the way this IETF is moving in terms of more transparency. We can attend the ISG calls, the IAB calls, the meeting minutes. I believe we could go one step further by, disclosing the source of funding for the management team, the IESG and the IAB.
Okay. You mean like for in places where it's not clear already, or something more than that? I'm just wondering about the actual case. Like I work at Cisco, I think it's known. Do you want something in addition to that, or it's like for contractors?
In all cases, yes. In your case, it's obvious. In some cases, it's not that obvious.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, something along the lines of, I'm Warren Kamari, I work for Google. I have never received any sort of pressure from my employer to push a specific position. When balloting on documents, I'm extra vigilant from my employer. I'm also a no-fee consultant to USC for BRoot, and that's my full, okay.
Thank you, Benoit. I think that's a fantastic observation. I'm more than happy to disclose who pays me, when they pay me, happy to disclose when I have a conflict of interest from any other ICANN person doing draft work or doing publications. Great point, thank you.
Benoit, we on the ISG description page with our photos, and we have a small write-up which everybody can access. Some people do put there that their funding is via such and such, so we should just make sure that's updated and put something like that there. Go ahead.
And actually, I guess I'll just sort of follow up from that. When Stephen Farrell was an AD, he actually had a little thing at the bottom of his description saying that he got some funding from various people. And so, yeah, I think that's a useful thing for the interest of transparency.
Seems like a good idea. We can take a look back at the page and we can talk about it in case there's somebody for whom it creates a problem, but seems simple enough to do. Okay.
Hi, this is Ulrich Wisser from IS. Yes, so through the years here in the plenary, I have often heard that, the surveillance is an attack on the internet and we want to protect users' privacies. This week, I was in a working group and I could firsthand observe that while we got privacy reviews, people were basically told in their face that, go away, we don't want you here. And okay, so I think there is some issues with that. I think this is taken care of. But when in the discussion, it basically came down to, when there was no arguments left, that, yeah, there is no process for doing this. There is no requirement for a privacy section in the RFC. There is no RFC that says how we should do this. So just let's do it. And I would like to encourage you or somebody with, more insight in looking over that and maybe say we require a privacy section as we require a security section, and that we put some more action where our mouth is.
Yeah, so I was one of the authors of RFC 6973, which is an IAB stream document which talks about privacy considerations for internet protocols. And the discussion that happened at the time as to whether a section should be mandatory or not essentially concluded that there's some cases where it makes a lot of sense, and some protocols have long, complicated privacy considerations that are distinct from the security considerations, and so certainly that would be a logical place to have a privacy consideration section. But there's other cases where that just doesn't make a lot of sense, and we've had enough experience through the years with mandatory sections of various different kinds, which we already have, to show that sometimes it's just not a good fit. So that document was published 5 years ago, and the feeling of people at the time was that we should leave it more open and have it be flexible. But the document does provide a lot of guidance about the kinds of privacy considerations that should be looked at and addressed. It's advisory, it's not mandatory. But I think between 6973 and 3552, which is the document about how to write a security consideration section, there is, and some of the other IAB documents that have been published, there's fairly comprehensive guidance about many privacy issues that arise in protocol design now. But if you think there's more that we need to draw them together, or if we should revisit the decision in 6973, then that's certainly fodder for community discussion. Ben?
One other comment there is that regardless of whether the section is required, it's not uncommon at all for drafts to hit IESG evaluation and get comments, and sometimes even discusses about privacy issues. So these are things we pay attention to, and there's things that get paid attention to in last call and such. So I'm not too worried about the structure, but I think, we do care about this.
Thanks. So Ben took the second half of what I was going to say. What I was going to open with is, I think this also ties back a lot to what Wes was highlighting, which is we really need to be a lot more cognizant of when people show up in working groups with their own set of interests, their own set of things they want to comment on, that we're very careful not to put them off in that way. Yours is not the first story I've heard recently or seen of people showing up in working groups to provide their input and being told to go away. And I think that's very damaging. That it's as damaging as any of the behaviors that Wes was talking about. So I want everyone in here to think very carefully about how their actions could be perceived when someone shows up in that way. Wes, you want to?
Yeah, if I might chime in a little bit. Wes Hardiker, ISI again. A lot of research into the power of diverse thinking and people coming with multiple viewpoints has really shown that in order to get new creative directions and new, even secure directions, right? I mean, whether it's privacy or whether it's anything, it can't happen unless you include as many distinct viewpoints as possible. And so to do that means you need to listen to as many people as possible and get as many people as possible from different walks of life to participate. And if you don't do that, your product is likely going to be less than it could have been.
Thanks.
Anybody else? No? Okay, thank you. Next.
Max Palak, Cable Labs, speaking as an individual. I wanted to follow up what Wes was saying about some negative attitude that might affect the ability of some people to bring some work here. I fear that the answer that you guys gave was kind of symptomatic of the fact that this problem, I fear it's underestimated. I've been recently, I suffer from that. My first IETF was almost 20 years ago, and I'm very committed to IETF. I love open standards. This is why I do a lot of work in many different areas. But sometimes I've been very discouraged, and I think that this has gotten worse and worse in the recent years. This is my personal opinion, of course, but I've seen things happening in work groups and also outside work groups that were not our best. And it was not IETF at its best. So what you were saying about, we are passionate and, we want to bring passion in our work. I'm very passionate about it, but that doesn't mean that we want to block work just because, not because of technical reasons. This has happened. Trying to block some work, and then there was humming, and the work got shut down just because of this. And personally, I was very discouraged to bring the work back here. I have other venues that I can go to. I don't want to. I would like really to have the standards, open standards, etc., that can really improve the internet. But I also don't want to be attacked or put so much effort in my work, and then the work got shut down not because of technical reasons, but for other, and in not very nice ways. Let's put it this way. So I think that I would have liked to have a more articulated answer to the problem. I hope that you guys will consider this, and maybe a solution could be to have more control over the working group, or maybe the chair should be more attentive to this problem. And I really hope that we can improve on this, because I think that in the recent past, this has gotten worse and worse and worse. As Wes, with the testimony, probably there's many people that feel this way, but also saying this here is not easy, right? Because some of the people might think that, well, now you're going to suffer for that. And this is how people will feel. If I say something, I will probably get retaliated against because of this type of toxic environment in some cases. So please try to reconsider that, talk about it, and I would really like you to take it seriously. It's probably a problem. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for standing up to the mic to come tell us that. And I apologize if it seems like we aren't taking it seriously, although I feel like it's something that we talk about quite a lot. And I guess the struggle is that this is a bottom-up organization, and there's limited vectors that we have for changing people's behavior. So we've tried some things. There's certainly more that we can do. But again, even if the 15 people up here, lead by example and do all the things that are expected of us, it's a community of thousands, and it needs to be something that everybody takes into consideration and not just us. But I do think there's probably more discussion to be had amongst the IHG about what more we think we can do.
I wasn't sure if you're ready or not. Bron Gondwana, I wanted to talk about something that happened in one of my working groups at last IETF, the extra working group. We had somebody come and present something that they wanted us to accept as working to the working group. And we looked at it and said, this is a special case hack that should be handled more generally. Please come back. And we're happy to help you. And we got a fair bit of pushback of why won't you just accept what we want to do because it's easier for us. And that's a really difficult situation. The answer can't just be, yes, we'll accept your stuff because you're newcomers and we want you to feel welcome when it clearly doesn't fit the existing standards. And there was a fair bit of, look, we'd love to help you, but this is not the right venue and this is not the right thing. Please keep discussing on our mailing list, but we can't accept this as is. And I feel we did discourage them and push them away and they haven't re-engaged. But I can't see an alternative path that wouldn't have just been, we'll accept your stuff because you're new.
So I think there's an important distinction that comes out of your comment and also from Max, is that there's sort of two different things to talk about here. One is a kind of aggressive, attacking behavior, inappropriate behavior, where you have a message to deliver, but you deliver it in a way that is, not what's to be expected in a friendly environment. The other is the fact that some work progresses in the IETF and some work doesn't. And so even if you're sending the same message, there's two different ways to send the message. It sounds like, the first problem was not the problem in this case. Second problem, I agree with you, is much harder to tackle because it's just a fact of the matter that not every piece of work that comes into the IETF will come out of it. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure that it's clear that I think those are kind of separable problems in a way, and that might make it easier for us to figure out what more we can do on either front.
Following up on.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Barry Leba. I was there with that discussion, and it definitely was attacking the technical aspects of what they were bringing forward, not attacking them. And that's the main difference there that I saw. It was certainly a very vigorous discussion, but it was specifically talking about the technical aspects, and no one was saying, you're stupid, go away, or anything like that. However, I do agree with Bron that the message they got was that they should go away, and I don't know what to do about that.
Maybe they have some other piece of work that they that's more general that they might want to bring back. I don't know. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, we're going to Nalini next.
Nalini Elkins. I think there's a few things. It seems to me that there's some fundamental problems in achieving consensus that I've seen. And part of it has to do, I think, too, with in some groups, you tend to get, what we, you sort of call the in crowd. And you can't help but be that way if you've put a lot of effort into that particular group. Maybe you've done a lot of things for 10 years, but what I've seen too is that people get very stuck in their own positions. And then it's very difficult to come to consensus, to start talking to each other. And you can see it forming already, is that, if you've got an idea, you can see the camps sort of starting to coalesce, and neither side wants to move. And I've seen it happen kind of over and over again. And you end up not working together very well. And things get turned away that are actually that will come back again because it led to it was a failure in group processing. I guess I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but I don't know if that makes sense to you guys. Is that just the process that we have of presenting things and achieving consensus and the way we go about doing it, there's some things that need to be worked on. And I actually started working on something with Henning on just, why things fail all along the way. But I don't know, it's kind of related to this whole topic of people not listening to each other and not really working with each other over the long term to reach a really good solution.
Thanks. Spencer, go ahead.
So I've tried to help. I've succeeded in helping some people, but tried to help more probably bring new proposals into various places at the IETF, whether they were BOFs or just individual proposals and working groups and things like that. And I think one of our community responsibilities is kind of helping people understand that if you just want your thing to be approved, that's really not a working group thing. It's like working groups should actually work on things that are working group things. So I've been involved in one of the hot RFC topics this week, where just explaining to the proponents, it's like what you're trying to do is these 4 things. And there are, for one of those things, there's like 3 or 4 other communities that I can think of off the top of my head that care. You take that one thing and talk to them. You're not going to get your whole thing as a working group, but there's other people who have pieces of the same problem, and you can work on it together, which is kind of what a consensus-based technical organization like ours needs to do, is to work on things together and produce things of high quality.
So yes, you identified a problem, and I agree it's a real one. But what I didn't hear anywhere in there is sort of a possible solution or how we could improve this. Some of this is human nature, and changing that's really hard. What can we do to make it better?
Yeah, actually, I started working on a draft with Henning to go about this. It has to, but it's a psychological dynamics kind of a draft. You know what I mean? So I'll finish it because it's not an easy solution. You know what I mean? Because I do totally want to work together, but I find that we don't come together too often because we don't listen to each other, and everybody gets really stuck in their own, it is human nature to get stuck in their sides. And let me do this is, if anybody wants to work on this with me, it's going to take some time to figure out how to do this. Then I'll go ahead and finish that draft, but I totally think we need this. So just, anybody come talk to me and we'll work on it. Yeah. Thank you, Warren.
Thank you. I think Mark was next.
Thank you, Mark Blanchet. 2 points. With and the topic that we've been discussing, I think we need to be careful that it's not only affecting newcomers, but everybody. We've been kind of saying newcomers, but it's actually everybody. A second point is more something that to me is a problem, is when people are presenting, people come to the mic interrupting with various excuses such as clarification question. And then you come into multiple people having a side conversation over the mic while the actual question was answered the next slide coming. To me, that's a lack of respect to the presenter. So for when I'm chairing working group, I usually ask people to wait until the end of the presentation to ask their question. To me, that would be an improvement and better respect for the presenter.
Yeah, it seems like a chair training, and a good thing for chairs to keep in mind. Okay, John.
Yeah, John Levine. I have an irrelevant anecdote and then a comment. And the anecdote is, my wife used to be the clerk of our local Quaker meeting, and I watched the process they use. And they don't call their process consensus, but everybody else does. And it requires a great deal of listening and patience. But a key aspect that I didn't know about, and I think a lot of other people don't, is there is what's called standing aside. Which is basically, it's their version of rough consensus, and for consensus, basically consensus doesn't work if people are going to filibuster. And there has to be a point at which people look at something and say, I'm not crazy about it, but I'm not unhappy enough to block it. I will stand aside, and that's a key part of a process. And it's something I think that many of us who are passionate are not very good at, and with all due respect to our desire to get people passionate and involved, I've seen too many times that you can work really hard on something and feel really passionately about something, and it's still a bad idea. And I mean, the episode that Bram was talking about, I happen to have known the guy for a long time, and he was basically a tourist. And he did not understand our processes at all, and he wasn't really interested in learning about them. He wanted his thing, and when we said, well, actually, it's this long, complicated thing, he said, never mind. And on the one hand, I think it's sort of a shame that he's not coming back. On the other hand, I think, we have this complicated process, which, and this is sort of ties in with what Natalie was talking about, which is I don't think we understand our own processes well enough. And I think that along with not being mean to people, there's a certain amount of necessary humility that, I know this is the right thing to do, but I guess I haven't persuaded everybody else, so I'll stand aside.
Thank you. Brett?
I think she was first.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Right. Amelia Andersdotter from Article 19. So I have 2 procedural issues. Maybe 3. Is it in the IESG's view the case that a privacy consideration in a draft at the IETF would ever be prohibited? And does it need to get the approval of the IESG before it is formulated? And then I would also like to know if your answer would differ if this concerned a human rights consideration instead. And it's just because it came up earlier in the week. And so I'd just like to have some clarification from the IESG on this point. Thank you.
Sure. So as far as I know, nothing is prohibited in an internet draft. You can, I know, you can even put non-ASCII text. Actually, color is prohibited. So do not write your privacy considerations in color. But otherwise, internet drafts are fair game for any content.
So it would be up to the working group to decide then whether they think it's appropriate for a draft.
Right. For a working group draft, it's up to the working group to decide what content goes in. As far as, getting through the IESG, then we have a process at the end where the IESG reviews all the drafts, and we have to come to some agreement on whether they should be published as RFCs. So, but there's no prohibitions other than color.
Thank you.
Yeah. Right. Brett.
Brett Jordan. First, before I start, I'd like to thank the members of the ISG for the time and effort that you put in. This is an unruly organization, and you put in an enormous amount of effort and time. So I want to thank you for that. What I have noticed over the past several IETF meetings is an increase in toxicity of certain discussions and in certain working groups to the point where they are just becoming vile. I think in some regards, individuals' bad behavior is getting rewarded. People will stand up to the mic and they will make a claim, or they will make a request, or illustrate some use cases, or even do a presentation on a draft. And immediately individuals will line to the mic in droves to shoot down the idea before any option has been given for any type of support. And so as a spectator or as another individual or a contributor in the working group, when you see certain individuals line up in droves to shoot something down, you don't want to stand up and say, well, I do support that. And so I think, when you look at this holistically, management is hard. Consensus-based management is hard. And I think that chairs and area directors could potentially do a little bit better job. I think they could focus the discussion on making sure that people can fully describe their thought first and make sure that individuals can express, either support for or a call for support for or a call for people that are against it. And when people continually stand up to the mic and say no, and then they sit down and, 2 or 3 minutes later, they stand back up to the mic and say no, it's, yes, you've been heard. Thank you so much for your feedback, but I'd like to know, is there anybody that is in support of this? And if so, why? Just because you don't like somebody's use case doesn't mean that use case isn't valid. And they can be bringing a perspective that you may not have visibility into. Your product that you work on, your company that you work for, or the technology you support may not see the other side. And so I would ask that maybe a little more care be given so that we can reduce the amount of toxicity that exists in some of these working groups and some of these discussions, because quite frankly, it's turning people away. I'm relatively new I've followed the IETF for years, but it's only been the past 3 years that I've been more or less active and trying to bring stuff and trying to work on things and help various working groups. But I am quite frankly getting to the point where I'm just ready to say screw it, and I'll go back and work in other areas because it has become so difficult and so painful, and there's just vile disagreement in some of these working groups, and it just needs to stop. End of comment.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for being our thank you fairy. It's very much appreciated. I would like to make a request because we've had now like many people on the same theme, and I think I know some of the examples that people are thinking of, but certainly not all of them. And as a group, the 15 of us should be able to be aware of all of them. So if there's particular cases that people are concerned about, I would ask you to find an area director and talk to them about these within the next day if you're still here. We have a wrap-up meeting on Friday where we usually go over the week and talk about what the hotspots were. And I want to make sure that we get all of these out so that we're aware of, so that the whole ISG can be aware of the full scope of this problem as it's manifest this week. So please do that if you feel comfortable, or you can come talk to me. I probably wasn't in most of the groups, but come talk to any of us. I would really appreciate it.
I want to make one real quick point also. I've seen both on mailing lists and heard in this discussion a couple of different terms used almost interchangeably. That would be newcomer and tourist. And the only difference, as far as I can tell, between a newcomer and a tourist is a newcomer is a tourist you have not chased away.
Okay. Now, I disagree with that a little bit, because sometimes we get people just popping into working groups who aren't really participating. And those are the people I tend to think of as tourists. They're just there to be in the audience, and they aren't, as I said, they aren't working in this area. They're there to learn, basically, which is cool, but that's a little bit different. They aren't necessarily newcomers. But actually, did I mention I'm Melinda Shore? Hi. We do consensus really badly. I mean, really badly. And I think I'm increasingly convinced this is a training problem, right? Because, if you, in a lot of working groups, we see humming being treated as sort of a vestigial form of voting, for example. That one's really common. That consensus isn't being called frequently, and, the working group isn't being checked in on in terms of where they are with decisions and thinking. I absolutely agree with John that we have a fundamental problem with training participants as well. And, this business of, not being able to say, I disagree, but I'm not going to block this. You know, people need to be a lot more willing to say that. But I think that, circling back to the training question, there's something we can do there. I think that sort of training IESG and IAB members on consensus, and then filtering that down to working group chairs would help make some progress on this. I think that I know it's really difficult to find working group chairs, but we should also check, as we're making these decisions about hiring new chairs, we should maybe be checking in with them about what they know about consensus decision-making and, you know, and collaboration and so on. Because I know that I've never been asked that, and I've chaired a bunch of working groups, so.
That's because we know you know. But yes, very good suggestion. Thank you. Michael.
Next, yeah, Michael Richardson. So actually, that's wonderful segue. I actually got up when Jordan was speaking, and I was going to stand up earlier, but then I decided we were going to close. I would like some training. That's what I would like as a working group chair. I don't know where it fits into the week. That's a difficult problem. And I would like, actually, the first thing I wanted to come up and ask for is I would like some evaluation. Not actually necessarily from you guys, who I'm pretty sure none of you are human resources experts, but I actually am thinking that we should have someone who understands that kind of stuff come into our working group sessions, pay attention for an hour or two on our mailing list, and try and give us some constructive feedback as to what's going on. I think that would be very useful, particularly in the working groups where it has become, as the word was, very vile. The question is, you know, basically, how can we learn to do this better? And as to elicit your comment that you know that Melinda knows, but actually, it might be that there are new ways and interesting things that have developed that we don't know, and therefore we never thought to learn it, right?
Sure.
And so that's the kind of things that I'm kind of would be really interested in having to do that. And I know all of you guys, you know, would also benefit from it, but also would benefit from having that feedback and that somewhat impartial person come back and say, well, I wasn't listening to any of the technical stuff because I don't know it, but what I saw was these interactions, and I also saw this other thing happening in the back of the room that was weird, right? That the chair couldn't even notice or something like that. So I would really appreciate that. That I think would be very useful to me. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, if I could just mention on this, I did like I said, I did a tutorial on Sunday afternoon and was talking to people about tutorial kind of things afterwards. And I did not realize that we were doing, you know, a small IETF overview as a webinar like a couple of weeks before. Well, I mean, we went for 100 IETFs before we did anything like that. So doing things that are new is really okay. You know, and for us to say we're going to be more intentional about helping people to learn, and the people who are really busy during the week, helping them learn some other time, that could be a beautiful thing. I know routing has done an awful lot with working group chair training over the past several years, maybe that could catch on and be something that the rest of the community can do something with. But say definitely we can do more. We can do more.
So Spencer actually read my mind on what I was going to say. We've been doing, no, that's okay. We've been doing chair training for the last few years. And some of the topics we talk about are precisely management topics. You know, how do we manage working groups? We've done several talks that Pete Gresnick has done on consensus, how to call it, what are different cases, et cetera. We've also done an interesting talk on managing conflict that Linda, who's the ISOC HR person, with one of our chairs did. That was also really, really nice for our chairs. We don't always get all our chairs because, there's no good time to get everyone on there at the same time. We have recorded these sessions. And we'd like to offer that we can find out, we know where the link is. So we can post the link somewhere so that people can go take a look at those. We do these periodically. These we try to do them once a year because we have new chairs and chairs that need refreshers. The other thing that we can probably do is next time we're going to do one of these, we'll advertise it a little bit more broadly so that other chairs can also participate with us.
Thanks. Yeah, and we can circulate the links to the recorded ones. Okay, I think we're over here.
Hi, Brian Dixon. I was just about to ask about the recording of the sessions. I was watching one of the sessions. It was one of the working groups that I don't normally attend, but it had an overlap with another area. I would definitely say it was highly toxic, and in that particular one, it actually appeared to be the working group chair that was making it worse. So I'll take it offline, but I think being able to go back and review the sessions and possibly getting somebody who's an HR type person also reviewing the sessions, I think would be very helpful. I don't like raising that kind of issue, but it was pretty bad.
Okay. Yeah, please follow up with somebody up here. Who's next? Bron.
I think so. Yeah, Bron Gondwana. As a relative newcomer, I joined in Chicago at 98, and kind of a strange introduction to IETF, I guess, because I was a working group chair at my very first meeting. I was ridiculously lucky that I went to Morgue just beforehand and got facilitation training. And the first time when I met a lot of the big voices that were going to be in the room at IETF, I met them in a context at Morgue where I was facilitating a group, and I just had the training on how to deal with that sort of situation. That was a really nice way into this. I did want to answer that idea that newcomers and tourists are the same. I think that newcomers are people who come in expecting to do work as well as to get the results they want, whereas my impression of a tourist is someone who comes in with a goal in mind, and all they want is to get that goal out of IETF, and they don't want to contribute an equivalent amount of effort. So they're coming to take from IETF rather than also to give. And I think it's worth having that distinction, and for people who are coming into IETF to explain that this is not just somewhere you come to get your work done for you, it's somewhere you come to contribute, and there is that equal give and take expected of you when you come here. I have not had a lot of the difficulty I think a lot of other newcomers have had, because I came in with the expectation that it would be a lot of work for me as well. It wasn't just come here and get given what you want.
Thank you. Kathleen.
Kathleen Moriarty. 2 points on the consensus and humming. One, when this has come up with my work when I was in AD, there wasn't universal agreement that on consensus and humming RFC was our method, right? So that's a key problem we have to solve there, and make sure that we either agree that that RFC is what we follow if we're going to start providing training, or that we come to a common definition. The other point I'd like to suggest is that when you consider training, that, you know, if you have one level for the chairs, I think it would be useful to have one for all participants as well, so that there is a deeper understanding of what we mean for consensus and humming, and you know, that if one point that's very strong from one individual could override consensus, like that type of idea would be very hard for somebody who's sitting and watching, even if the chairs know it, to grasp potentially, right? So I think broader training will be important too. So maybe it's a tech plenary topic or administrative plenary topic, but
right. Yes,
a
the
broader
non-tech
talk.
part of the plenary.
Right.
Yeah.
But a broader talk for everybody, and recorded and easy to play back.
Thanks. Anybody responding to that? No. Okay. Karen.
Yeah, actually, there's a number of things I could respond to, but since it's 8:08, I'll be really short. I'm Karen O'Donohue. I'm the lead of the edu team for the IETF. This is a very small team, but it's an open team and anybody can join. We've talked about working on working group chairs training. We've added the webinars. We've redone the newcomers overview. We've done a lot of things to sort of try and improve the training, but we could really use your help. And I'm hearing a lot of great ideas here. And please come help, because we don't have the resources to do it. Linda has offered to help us build some of these training things that we're talking about. We've talked about looking at the routing stuff and opening it up to everybody. We specifically talk about doing things first for working group chairs, and once we get it formulated, open it up to the Sunday tutorials. But we are more than open to ideas of how to do things, and we're absolutely more than open to resources to help get them done.
Where should we direct people to contact you to help?
The EduTeam mailing list, edu-team@ietf.org. And if I have the name wrong, it's actually listed in the mailing lists on the IETF website. I might have the name wrong.
Thank you.
Oh, that was right. So it is the right mailing list, edu-team@ietf.org.
Thank you, and thank you for all the time that you put into that, Karen, and the whole team, but you carry that on your back, so. Lou.
Lou Berger, I think the idea of more training on consensus for everyone, for chairs and participants, is a great idea. I am not opposed to a document that formalizes how we do consensus. I would ask that you take into account that not everyone's ears work the same way, and make sure that if you have a document, it doesn't say that humming is the only thing that we can do, because for some of us, it just doesn't work. We can't hear it.
Well, we also confirm everything on lists, right? So, in theory.
If I'm a chair and I'm asked and I'm trying to gauge consensus of a room, I can't use a hum. It just is all white noise to me.
Fair enough.
Alexander Azimov, Curator Labs. I'm speaking not for myself, but for a person that is not present here. He had to leave already. So the problem he met in one of the working groups is that there is a working group and there was a significant progress and it's nearly ready to provide version 2 or version 1 for a protocol. But he finds a problem, a real operational problem, and it's even confirmed by some of co-authors. But he's a bit afraid that in the working group, if he will start shouting and saying that, no, we need to fix, we need to change the protocol that is nearly ready, he will find himself alone, because a lot of people have invested a lot of time in designing it and were thinking already that it's nearly done. So the suggestion that he got is, it's only version 1, we will update it in version 2. The way of inertia, so the way it's already made investments, somehow makes a problem, because people are not ready to fix something at the last moment. When they were thinking that it's really done, even they have some implementations. What kind of suggestion you can give in this situation?
So this is, I think, a fairly common problem. This is for sure not the only time something like this has happened. And I think, how it's dealt with is kind of on a case-by-case basis. So not really knowing the details, it's hard to assess exactly in this case what has happened. But I think, sometimes we do end up putting the brakes on and incorporating some change to a protocol before it gets finished. And sometimes you wait for a new version. It's kind of up to the working group. But I guess to me, the more concerning thing that you said is that he was afraid to raise this, right? That seems like a serious problem, because nobody should be afraid to raise an issue and a technical problem that they find in a protocol design out of fear, right? That's not a good dynamic. So for that bit, again, I would encourage you to let one of us know the specifics of the situation so that we can help to get it resolved, because if that's the culture in the working group, then that's not a good thing.
Okay, thank you for the comment.
Okay. Thank you, ISG. And now I'd like to welcome the IOC and the LLC board up to the stage. So let's do board on this side and other IOC on this side.
Didn't know we could do that. Portia. You're in the middle. You started with them, but you started with them. This is the opportunity to come to the microphone, and I'm. Oh, my bad. Sorry, it's late.
Gonzalo Camarillo.
Alyssa Cooper.
Ted Hardy.
Blondine.
Portia Winstanley.
John Levine. John Levine, former IAOC member.
Lou Berger.
Andrew Sullivan. Kaveh Reinschwer.
Yes, sir.
Terry Manderson, no hats. Now that the LLC board is getting on its way to being well constructed, I'd like to ask you to live within your budget. And that means when you present something, you tell us about the revenue, and you also tell us about the projected expenses, because you're talking about P&Ls now. I noticed your slides tonight only gave us revenue and didn't give us the other side of the story. Please consider that.
To that point, we are finishing the first LLC budget. And when we are done, we will be, as has been the practice for the IOC in the past, we will be publishing that. So, yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes.
This is a question from the Jabber room from over an hour ago. It seems no one was designated to bring questions to the mic. I think that the IAB might have been on stage. So after noticing, I think it's from John Clinton, but it's not 100% clear. Okay. After noticing that we had been unable to progress any internationalization work for a rather long time, and that documents with internationalization aspects were not systematically being reviewed by experts, a BOF was held in Montreal to discuss the issue and make a plan. The BOF concluded that a special directorate should be created to work through those issues and lay out a plan to make progress. Has the directorate been formed and started making progress in private, or have we concluded that the IETF does not care about internationalization or is unable to focus on it?
So first of all, apologies. It's, my complete oversight in not getting a Jabber scribe. So I'm really sorry for that. The IAB is not on the stage, so I think it's probably not appropriate to answer unless, oh, the responsible area director. There you go.
Yeah, basically, our pages have discussing this, and we're a bit slow on just finishing the final touch on creating the directory. So yeah, we should have been a bit quicker about this, but there is a plan. Oh, that would be very soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Alice, for doing that.
Anyone else? Mic lines are open. Going once, going twice. Thank you, and have a good dinner.